Since Vatican II, the Church in all her wisdom has recognized the importance of full participation in all of our liturgies. The days of sitting out there and being a passive attendee have long been over. And today we experience that in a very moving way, didn't we? Because we all take part in the proclamation of the gospel. This is the only time in our liturgical calendar that someone other than a priest or a deacon is involved in proclaiming the gospel. And it's fitting that at the end of each year when we have this gospel, it's one of the gospels of the Passion of Christ. And this week we are entering is the source and the summit of our faith. The Paschal mystery is really the life, passion, death, and resurrection of Christ. Isn't it the foundation of the good news? And we get to experience in a special way by taking a real part. Kind of like a play, acting it out. But not just acting it out, making it a part of who we are. By allowing this kind of participation in our gospel, the Church wisely invites us to enter into the story in a very different way. But not just historically, but by entering into it to bring it to the present in our own hearts. When we meditate on Scripture using this kind of a technique, using our imagination, and we inject ourselves into different parts of the story itself, that's a powerful tool. And it's a special way of prayer and a special spiritual activity. In doing this, we come closer to experiencing Scripture rather than trying to read it or understand it or digest it. Well, let's look at some of the possibilities. What would it have really been like if you and I had been in that crowd, the part that most of you just read this evening? Picture Jesus standing there in front of Pilate when he was choosing whether he was going to release Barabbas or Jesus. And he looks out over the crowd, and his eyes catch yours, standing in the crowd. What does he see? Maybe he sees someone who's just afraid and fearful in their eyes. Or maybe somebody who was puzzled and just didn't know what to do. Would he have seen tears of sympathy for what was going on? Or maybe he would have heard me or you shouting, "Crucify him." Or maybe there would have been a look of judgment on our face. You know, one of the things that makes this difficult, though, is that we know the end of the story. We know how it begins and how it ends. They didn't. So we kind of have to suspend that knowledge if we're going to put ourselves into the story in that way. This is a kind of an exercise where we have to be honest and restrict what we know in the future. And how would I have reacted had I really been there? And how does that affect who I am today? That brings a story into the present. Let's take another role. What if we had been one of the soldiers? They were just doing their jobs, right? If I was a soldier, most likely I would have been suspicious of Jesus and thought, we need to stop this guy before he upsets our lifestyle. He's disrupting everybody's life. And going through the process at the end, I probably would have been glad that it was over and that things could return to normal. Or could I have been that soldier that at the very end was so moved by everything he saw that he became a believer and followed an innocent man? How about Peter? Would I have had the courage to overcome the trepidation and the fear and the anxiety and stayed there and stood up for Jesus? Or would I too have denied him? And in my weakness, would I have cowered under the pressure? In this role, we can fast forward to the present and ask myself that same question. When have I been afraid and cowardice in front of God? Or maybe even when have I denied him at times? What if you or I had been one of the group of apostles? We would have gone up to the Mount of Olives. It was a place familiar to them. Would I have stayed behind like the rest of them and gotten tired and fallen asleep? Or maybe I would have seen the distress in Jesus' eyes and the fear that he had, and maybe I would have decided to spend some time with him and give him consolation, even if I didn't understand what was going on. Or maybe I would have wanted Jesus to be more firm and stand up to the authorities and make a real effort to change things like a real king. You see, there's many perspectives to each part that we might pick to play in this story. And it does give us insight into the history, but it gives us insight into who we are too. What if I were one of those two criminals? Which one would I be? I can certainly see myself being the one that thought, this might be my way out. If he is who he says he is, I can benefit from a miracle, and maybe he can save me and save him. Why don't you try that? Or could I have mustered the courage to be that second thief, knowing Jesus was innocent, seeing his honesty and his charisma, and being the one to say he doesn't deserve what he's given, and ask him for mercy and forgiveness? Isn't that in essence what we do at reconciliation? How do I approach Jesus when I need his mercy and tenderness? We could go on and on. Think of those women who supported Jesus and encountered him along the path. How horrible it was to see him tortured. And lastly, what would it have been like to be Jesus himself? In this role, we can only imagine it from a human standpoint, but what if we were the one on trial? And it might seem strange. We might say, well, I can't do that. He's God. Why not? If we really want to follow him, let's put ourselves in his shoes. What would it have been like to see your friends and comrades abandon you? Maybe we've had that happen in our own life. And how did we react? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What was it like from his perspective? My friends, the point is this. Reading the Gospels like a play, we only scratch the surface of the richness of experiencing scriptures like this. So as we enter into this Holy Week and experience the Triduum, we're invited to use this technique more and more and give a fuller and richer experience of the Scriptures. And then let's respond and become what we believe.